Welcome to TPM Vid's Disney Beat, where we talk about all things Disney. If you're new to the channel and like what you see, hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Nothing beats the excitement of experiencing a new ride or attraction at the Disney theme parks. Now, usually these construction projects follow pretty structured timelines, but sometimes unexpected problems and delays can come up. During these situations, many people are quick to deem these projects failures, but delays have been happening dating as far back as the opening of Disneyland. A lot of these quote-unquote failed attraction openings turn out to be smash hits, but some become defunct pieces of the past. Today, we're gonna dive into the history of why it happened. So let's explore the stories of 3 failed openings at the Disney theme parks. Part 2. Number 3. For over 20 years, Test Track has been one of the most popular rides at Walt Disney World. But it has some pretty troubled beginnings. Before Test Track, there was World of Motion. It was one of the original Epcot pavilions in 1982, sponsored by General Motors. They were actually the first sponsor to sign on to Epcot back in 1977. World of Motion was a slow-moving dark ride that focused on the history and evolution of transportation. Well, in 1992, GM's contract with Disney was up for renewal. They were still interested in working with Disney, but they had one caveat to renewing another 10-year deal. They wanted a new ride built, focusing solely on cars. Disney agreed and went right to the drawing board. Now, the original plans for World of Motion called for a dark ride inside and then another attraction outside based off GM's Milford Proving Grounds for vehicle testing. Disney dusted off these old plans and modified their vehicle testing attraction. When it was presented to GM, they approved. On January 2nd, 1996, Disney closed World of Motion, and it was announced a brand new thrill ride called Test Track would open in spring of 1997. This $100 million attraction would be part of the celebration for Walt Disney World's 25th anniversary.
Beginning in spring 1997, brave 60-mile-per-hour maneuvers on the new Test Track, where you'll careen around 50-degree curves and rocket through lightning-fast straightaways.
In February of 1997, Disney and GM were getting the word out about Test Track coming to Epcot.
But the biggest challenge yet is the new high-speed Test Track. It'll be Disney's fastest, most physical ride ever.
Now, a brand new ride system was being developed for Test Track. And with any new system, there's bound to be some hiccups along the way. One of the initial problems encountered was the heavy wear of the vehicle's tires. Due to the high speeds and quick acceleration, the tires would occasionally fly off. Thankfully, Disney quickly came up with a solution to this problem, but spring of 1997 came and went, and the attraction did not open. At the beginning of June in 1997, the Orlando Sentinel announced that Disney was officially pushing back the opening to August of 1997. The kicker is everything was installed and the entire ride was built and ready to go. The issue stemmed from the complexity of the ride system and vehicle testing. Each ride vehicle had to go through rigorous testing on the track, first by itself. Then it was added to the other group of cars to make sure the safety and show elements would work with all the cars on the track. It was a slower than expected process, and no margin of error could exist. I mean, each car is run by 3 computers, and when combined, it has more processing power than the ones used on the Space Shuttle. So this is some pretty heavy-duty equipment. Theme park fans were eager to experience the fastest ride at Walt Disney World. But on October 16, 1997, headlines read, "Epcot puts brakes on ride." Disney ran into another major problem that would delay Test Track even further. Now, Disney built this brand new ride system for Test Track, but apparently the central computer system that runs the ride was not powerful enough. Tech problems and weather-induced power surges would constantly crash the system, taking an hour to reboot. They couldn't operate a ride like this, it wasn't reliable. Imagine the amount of downtime? So Disney had no other choice. They had to scrap the original software and replace it with a brand new system. This meant the vehicles would have to go through that rigorous testing again. It was announced Test Track would now open spring of 1998, 1 year later than its intended opening.
Later this year, hold on for the ride of your life on the new Test Track. It's the longest, fastest attraction in any Disney theme park.
Walt Disney World's 25th anniversary was set to end in January of 1998, so they completely failed on delivering Test Track for the celebration. And speaking of failing, it was reported in December of 1997 that one of the cars actually crashed into a wall during testing. The Orlando Sentinel said as the car neared the end of the track, instead of slowing down and making a turn, a car slowed down, left the track, and hit a wall at about 20 miles per hour. Thankfully, only sandbags were in the car at the time, and no one was hurt. At this point, the ride had been through so many delays and problems that Disney just removed the opening year off the poster outside. They kinda just stopped talking about the ride altogether. Guests visiting the park could hear the ride vehicles testing, but were confused as to why they couldn't ride. I mean, it had been opening soon for over a year now. Well, in August of 1998, news broke that the opening of Epcot's Test Track ride hits the brakes again. How many times can a ride get delayed? Well, if it's Test Track, a lot. It received the nickname of Disney's most troubled ride. At this point, they were only testing 4 or 5 cars a day on the track, and Disney officials were now predicting a spring 1999 opening. Finally, as December 1998 rolled around, things were actually looking up. The poster outside was taken down, and Disney quietly began doing sneak previews for guests in the park. As they worked through some minor reliability problems, previews continued into the new year when it was announced Test Track would finally open on March 17th, 1999.
Drivers confronting the most punishing conditions. They are the new breed of test driver, mercilessly putting cars through their paces. Who are these masters of the road? Test Track, new at Epcot. See if you've got what it takes.
Although Test Track was delayed by 2 years, it was well worth the hype, and it quickly became the most popular ride at Walt Disney World. Guests lined up for hours waiting to experience this one-of-a-kind adventure on a crash test course. There was nothing quite like the original Test Track, which ended up closing in April of 2012. It had a certain charm and energy the current updated version does not have. But what's your opinion? Do you prefer the old Test Track or the updated version? Comment below. Number 2. Animal Kingdom's Discovery River Amphitheater sits empty every night, and it's the result of one of Disney's most tragic nighttime spectaculars. When the park opened in 1998, many people deemed it a half-day park. There really wasn't anything keeping you in the park later than 4 or 5 o'clock, especially since there wasn't a nighttime spectacular. Over the years, the park saw a few additions, but it still wasn't enough to spend an entire day at Animal Kingdom. Well, just as plans for Pandora were being finalized in 2013, Disney announced at D23 Japan that a brand new nighttime spectacular, which would become Rivers of Light, would also be coming to Animal Kingdom. Finally, there would be something to cap off your day at the park. Disney fans were excited, to say the least. Well, construction on the Discovery River Amphitheater began in early 2014, along with a slew of other projects at Animal Kingdom. The new infrastructure for Rivers of Light, plus Pandora and other additions, would mark the largest expansion in the park's history. Disney was investing a lot of money to transform Animal Kingdom into a day and night experience. As construction progressed, we learned that in addition to Rivers of Light, Disney would be introducing more nighttime experiences at the park. This would include a nighttime version of Kilimanjaro Safaris, as well as the Tree of Life Awakenings. On March 8, 2016, it was announced that all the nighttime plans for Animal Kingdom, including Rivers of Light, would open on April 22, 2016.
It's amazing to think that here in broad daylight, we've got this beautiful, wonderful environment, but at night, it's completely different. It's completely magical.
As it neared the end of March, Disney was doing a lot of testing during the day, which they wouldn't do in normal circumstances. Then rumors began to circulate. It turns out the show was experiencing some major technical difficulties. Disney needed Rivers of Light to kick off the extended evening hours at Animal Kingdom. Without it, their plan would fail, so Disney was forced to make a tough decision. On April 5th, just 17 days before the opening, it was announced Rivers of Light, along with the other nighttime experiences, were delayed. When it comes to Rivers of Light, it turns out there were some serious issues with the automation of the wireless control system. They couldn't even complete a full run during rehearsals without stopping. Rivers of Light was not reliable, but Disney needed a nighttime show to give guests a reason to stay in the park. So, on April 19th, a limited engagement show called The Jungle Book Alive with Magic was announced. It was based on the recent live-action version of The Jungle Book, and it debuted on May 27th along with the other planned nighttime offerings. Disney put the entire Jungle Book show together in just over a month, and although it was much more costly to run than Rivers of Light, guests were less than impressed. They were expecting a nighttime spectacular, and instead were met with a nighttime stage show. The good news was that the Rivers of Light floats continued to test during the day. Jungle Book Alive with Magic closed on September 5th, and with that, the park's hours were cut back. Nighttime at Disney's Animal Kingdom failed, but Disney was determined to get Rivers of Light up and running. Testing continued, but it was such a tech-heavy show that once one aspect was fixed, other parts were also affected. Finally, they were able to schedule a cast preview on November 27th, with hopes of opening Rivers of Light in December. The preview began. Then, 7 minutes in, they had to stop the show due to a technical problem. The show was reset and they tried it again from the beginning. It went off without a hitch, even receiving a standing ovation. Word began circling that it was technologically stunning, but apparently parts of the show were still missing. The original concept called for about 100 floating lanterns on the river. Disney had been trying to get these to work, but they never made it into any of the previews. After the next set of cast member previews the following weekend, Disney officials made the call to postpone Rivers of Light until 2017. The show just wasn't guest ready. And as we were waiting for a concrete opening date, modifications to the show were being made. Well, 2017 came and the Discovery River Amphitheater sat empty during the day. But after the park closed, the show was being run nightly to an empty stadium. Then there was good news. It was announced that Rivers of Light would finally make its official debut on February 17th, 2017. Now, from 2016 to 2017, almost 3 minutes of the show was shaved off, but it was still visually stunning. Also, they were never able to get those floating lanterns to work. The initial reaction was fairly positive, but the average theme park guest saw it as being a bit boring. After the same floats moved around the river for 5 minutes, you pretty much saw it all. Sure, there was fire, but a big issue for many people was that the show had a lackluster finale. It just didn't feel like that iconic Disney nighttime spectacular. As the months went on, guests weren't responding to the show in the way Disney had hoped for. By September of 2018, Disney cut the shamans from Rivers of Light. Then in May of 2019, the show was retooled as Rivers of Light, We Are One. This time, it incorporated Disney characters and weaved Disney song themes in the score. It was Disney's attempt to fix Rivers of Light, but it seemed like the core concept of the show was just flawed from the start. Once the pandemic hit in 2020, Disney announced in July that Rivers of Light was officially closed. The show never received a true closing night, and it played its last performance on March 12, 2020. Now, who knows when we'll see a new nighttime spectacular at Disney's Animal Kingdom? It's such a shame because Rivers of Light had so much potential. Number 1. The Fantasyland expansion at Magic Kingdom doubled the size of Fantasyland, but construction dragged on for over 4 years. The project was first announced in September 2009. Construction was set to begin in 2010, with it opening in 2 phases. Phase 1 would be ready in 2012 and would include Enchanted Tales with Belle, Be Our Guest restaurant, Gaston's Tavern area, Under the Sea Journey of the Little Mermaid, Cinderella and Aurora meet and greets in the center, plus Dumbo and the Barnstormer on the right. Pixie Hollow was Phase 2 and was set to open in 2013. It was planned to be a mini land where you could meet Tinkerbell and her friends. It was all a huge expansion, but as a whole, it focused heavily on meet and greets and not rides. Most of Phase 1 was planned to take over the old 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea footprint. So in March 2010, Disney broke ground right on schedule. Land was being cleared and the project was moving along. In April of 2010, it was announced the new Ariel meet and greet plus Under the Sea Journey of the Little Mermaid would be opening now in 2013. This sounded like the first delay in the Fantasyland project since it was originally announced to be part of Phase 1 in 2012. Now, like any new Disney project, it wasn't long before rumors started circulating about a shakeup to the expansion plans. In August of 2010, just 5 months after construction began, the Orlando Sentinel interviewed Tom Staggs, who had just taken over as chairman for Walt Disney Parks and Resorts in January. It turned out the rumors were true. He said they were looking for a way to balance the expansion to appeal to a broader audience. As it was, the plans were too heavily focused on the princesses. Another major event to take place that year in June was the opening of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter at Universal Studios. Harry Potter was creating such a buzz and appealed to a much broader audience than Disney's plans for Fantasyland. Disney needed something to compete. At this point, vertical construction had been moving along on everything minus the center section. So many people speculated this was where changes were being made. Well, on January 18, 2011, Disney revealed their new plans for the Fantasyland expansion, and it was met with praise. First, they announced the expansion would be called New Fantasyland. Dumbo and the Barnstormer were being expanded into an area called Storybook Circus, and they announced another new ride, the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. Fantasyland would be getting a brand new family coaster which would take over the area in the center of the expansion. The concept art had a fall 2012 date, but in the park's blog article, they mentioned how New Fantasyland will be constructed in phases, with most new experiences open by 2013. Seeing as how construction on Snow White hadn't gone vertical, it was pretty apparent the new coaster wouldn't be making the already delayed 2013 opening date. If Disney was really concerned with Harry Potter competition, they could have moved much quicker, but they didn't. Once 2012 rolled around, the Barnstormer and all of Mickey's Toontown was closed, the original Dumbo had been removed, and Snow White's Scary Adventures would be closing on May 31st. The Magic Kingdom was down quite a few attractions. Crowds were beginning to increase, so Disney needed to get this expansion open as quick as possible. Thankfully, in March of 2012, Storybook Circus opened to alleviate waits in the park, but no opening dates had been announced for the rest of the $425 million expansion. When Storybook Circus first opened, there were construction walls everywhere, and the project wasn't even complete. The second Dumbo carousel was still under construction, not to mention the rest of Fantasyland. Phase 2 of Storybook Circus didn't open until October of 2012, then the rest of the original Phase 1 opened on December 6th. It was ahead of schedule by a couple months, which was great, but the land was still missing the headliner attraction. Seven Dwarfs Mine Train wouldn't open until May of 2014. Granted, they were developing a new swinging train for the coaster, plus 7 state-of-the-art animatronics. Readjusting the concept to include the Snow White coaster definitely appealed to a broader audience. It was a smart move to compete with Harry Potter at Universal, but it was a little late. Opening New Fantasyland in phases was a detrimental failure to the whole perception and impact of the land when comparing it to Harry Potter. It was like, hey, come check out our new land, there's construction walls everywhere. By the time Seven Dwarfs Mine Train opened, it had been 4 years since Harry Potter, so that ship kinda sailed. Maybe if Staggs had been chairman during the initial development of the expansion, the concept would have appealed to a broader audience right off the bat. Today, the expansion is great, but from 2012 to 2014, the project just seemed to go on forever. I don't think the phased approach was a smart choice. I mean, I'm glad we didn't get all those meet and greets, and in the long run, it all worked out with Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. It's still one of the most popular rides at Walt Disney World with the longest waits. But just imagine the impact if New Fantasyland opened all at once. So out of the 3 delayed attractions, which one is your favorite? I'd love to know. Leave a comment down below to start a conversation, and don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video.